Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. I'm Janet Schneider, this morning's worship associate. I feel very happy to greet all of you here today. First Church is a special place. It's a place where you are free to be you, no matter your race, sexual orientation, gender identity, socioeconomic status, age, hair color. Differences enrich us. Your unique qualities bring us joy. So show this beloved community your questioning mind, your expansive heart, your entire self. Our mission at First Church is to welcome all with love, to support learning and spiritual growth, to serve our wider community, and to work for justice, equity, and inclusion. If you are visiting with us today, we especially welcome you. Please feel free to join us for coffee hour following the service. It takes place in the Ellen Hall room. After the service, just follow the crowd or the smell of coffee. We would love to have a chance to get to know you, and we love to talk about our beloved community. Although note that we have a congregational meeting after the service, so coffee hour is going to be a little short today. A note about their flowers, they're given by the First Church staff in gratitude for the staff bonuses that the congregation provided this year. Now, a few announcements. As a reminder, it's important to take a few minutes to read the announcements and inserts in the order of service. We don't want you to miss important information regarding upcoming events. This week, for instance, you will see a number of adult education offerings that will be happening soon. If you would like to attend any of these events, please sign up, as this will help us plan accordingly. In addition, you will notice an upcoming book discussion. It's important to consider this early so you have plenty of time to read the book. And finally, please use the sign-up Genius links provided for each event so we can track participation in order to assess what we might offer in the future. And just a side note, Dan and I have both read the upcoming book called Search. We found it insightful, humorous, and we truly enjoyed reading it. We recommend it, so give that a thought. Okay, now it's time to greet our neighbors. Before we begin, let's wave to the people at home. And remember, when you hear the singing bowl, please return to your seats. You can continue your conversation at coffee hour. Periodically, we will be sharing a Did You Know moment during our welcome. This will give us an opportunity to remind and or educate ourselves about numerous things, from congregational matters to larger social matters. We begin this week with 5 interesting facts about Martin Luther King Jr. How many out of the 5 do you know? Number 1, did you know that Martin Luther King Jr.'s birth name was Michael? His father, a powerful pastor in Atlanta, traveled to Germany in 1934 and was inspired by what he learned about the great 16th century Protestant reformer, Martin Luther. In fact, his father was so moved that he changed his name and his son's to Martin Luther King when he returned home. Number 2, did you know that Martin Luther King Jr. started college at the age of 15? He did so well in high school that he skipped 2 grades, 9th and 12th, before enrolling at Morehouse College in 1944. It was there that he first learned about Gandhi and nonviolent civil disobedience. Number 3, did you know that Martin Luther King Jr. survived an earlier assassination attempt? At a book signing in Harlem, a woman named Izola Ware Curry plunged a 7-inch letter opener into his chest. The tip of the blade barely missed puncturing his aorta. The surgeons who saved his life later told him that if he had so much as sneezed, it would have killed him. Number 4, did you know that Martin Luther King Jr. was imprisoned 29 times? Most of his imprisonments were for acts of civil disobedience, as when he spent 11 days in the Birmingham, Alabama jail after being arrested for leading a demonstration. He wrote his letter from Birmingham jail while in solitary confinement. But sometimes the charges were completely made up, like the time he was arrested in Montgomery, Alabama for going 30 in a 25-mile-per-hour zone. And number 5, did you know that Martin Luther King Jr. was a Trekkie? When meeting Nichelle Nichols, the groundbreaking African-American actress who portrayed Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek, Dr. King said, "I am your greatest fan." As a matter of fact, this is the only show that my wife Coretta and I will allow our children to stay up late to watch because it's past their bedtime. How many knew all 5? Anybody know 4? 3? 2? 1? None? Chalice lighting. We will light our chalice this morning in memory of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "Nonviolence is absolute commitment to the way of love, and we adopt the means of nonviolence because our end is a community at peace with itself." Okay, Beth is going to come forward. Beth Lutz is going to come forward and do a board moment.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. I was up running our video. My name is Beth Lutz, and I'm currently the secretary on the Board of Trustees. And once a month, one of us likes to come up and just share a little bit about what we've been doing and kind of what's on our minds. Generally, the board, what we've been up to is we've been getting ready for the congregational meeting that's happening after the service today. Make sure you stick around for that. And we've also been reviewing some policies that we have and really trying to clarify the language in our policies that we have. So we did a lot of work on the bylaws in past years, and now we're just really trying to clean things up and make them as clear as possible. And so this is my first year serving on the board. And I've been just very, very impressed with the amount of love and devotion that my fellow board members bring to the job. These are people who deeply care about the future of our congregation, and I'm proud to be one of them. In my role as board secretary, I also have really taken to heart the developmental ministry goal of transparency and improved communication from the board. So I try to make sure I share as much as possible, and I would encourage anyone who has questions about what are you up to, what was behind this decision, to ask. Some things need to be confidential, obviously. We're handling a lot of, sometimes sensitive issues, but, ask us, and if we can't tell you right away, we'll figure out the answer. The other thing that I just wanted to share, so I work full-time, I have a teenage son and a family, and I'm very, very involved. I do a lot of things here. One, it's just because they're fun. They just seem really interesting. Like I find out, oh, there's an opportunity to crunch some numbers, let me do that. There's an opportunity to, and so I wouldn't think of myself as someone who, necessarily is real churchy, I guess is what I would say. Like I'm not, I don't think of myself as like a church lady. But there's just lots of great work for all of us to do, and I don't think anybody really wants to think of themselves necessarily in that kind of light. And so just if you are wondering if there's something that you can do, some way to be involved, think about it. Just look at the stuff that's going on, or maybe that isn't going on, that you think could be an improvement, and consider how you can contribute. Thank you.
Our first hymn this morning is number 389, Gathered Here. It's in the gray hymnal, or you'll find the words up on the screen. Please rise as you are able.
So my original intention for the meditation this morning is I was going to do a guided meditation with you all. But I've changed my mind. The choir's opening piece and that first hymn sort of put me in a more pensive, reflective mood. And as I was sitting there, I remembered also that several of you have commented to me that you really appreciate the silence we sometimes do on Sunday morning, and you'd like to hear more of it. So I think this morning we're just going to sit together in silence for 3-ish, or maybe even 4-ish minutes. Y'all know the joke about a Unitarian is a Quaker with attention deficit syndrome? Have you heard that before? So that's a way of saying Quakers, you know, one of their principal spiritual practices is the practice of silence, which I love. But Unitarians can struggle with that. So this morning, if you're a Quaker with attention deficit disorder, I invite you to practice with us, even though it might be hard. Practice the silence. And if it's a struggle, a simple way to manage your attention deficit mind as it bounces around in your head when there's nothing to pay attention to in silence is to take your awareness and place it on your breath. The breath is a wonderful anchor to keep your awareness in a neutral place so that you can participate in the silence of the moment more easily. And when you put your attention on your breath, it may simply mean count your breath. Inhale 1, exhale 2. Inhale 1, exhale 2. Inhale 1, exhale 2. You can count your breath. Or you can actually pay attention to the physiological phenomenon that takes place in your body while you're breathing. And that might just mean watching your abdomen rise and fall as you breathe. And really, truly getting lost in just watching your abdomen rise and fall as you breathe. Or, many people don't know this, but if you want to try this, you'll be surprised to find in the next few minutes that if you pay attention to the sensation of your breath on the tip of your nostril for a little bit of time, you'll be surprised to realize how intense that sensation becomes before too long. And that will also be a place where you can anchor your attention. The point we're after is we're trying to give our attention or our mind something to do that isn't too onerous, that will allow us to just be still with one another for a while if you need that. So we'll start with my hitting the singing bowl, and then we'll just sit together for a while in silence, and then I'll hit it again for us to end, and we'll move on with the musical reflection at that point. Y'all did very well with that moment of silence. Might even brag to my colleagues about how good First Church is at observing silence. That's wonderful. Because in my past experience, man, it has been a struggle for Unitarians to sit together in silence. When I was in divinity school studying Hebrew, I had a Hebrew professor who occasionally liked to critique the Unitarians in kind of a backhanded manner. Never directly, because there were Unitarians all over the divinity school, and we were paying his salary, so he was pretty careful about it. But if you got to know him a little bit, you kind of realized most of those digs are at us. And one of the things he once said to our class was, the problem with salad bowl religion, the problem with you Unitarians, is that it's a very broad approach to religion because we're non-creedal. We explore all the world's religions and philosophies that speak to us, but it doesn't go very deep. And his argument was that you sort of need to have a particular religious tradition that you stick with in order to have spiritual depth, rather than the smorgasbord approach, or what he called the salad bowl approach to religion. I titled this sermon The Collected Wisdom Plate. I collect wisdom from the religions and the philosophies and sometimes the scientists of the world. And in the past, it's been a number of years since I've done this, I would take a bunch of them and I would cut them up and I'd put them in the offering plate, and I'd call it the Collected Wisdom Plate. But this morning I've got too many for the offering plate, and I thought, I'm just going to grab my salad bowl and throw them in here. And that made me think of my Hebrew professor. So what this morning is kind of a potpourri, but I'm flying blind here. I mean, I'm the one who came up with all these sayings, but there's like almost 50 of them in here, I think I counted this morning, so I'm not sure what's going to be drawn out of our salad bowl because you all are going to do it. And then we're just going to sort of reflect on the different sources of wisdom that the fates decide upon this morning. Would you like to determine our fate? Pick one of those and hand it to me. I'll read it. I've got the mic, so I'll just read it. That's too long. Uh-oh. It's that one. I was hoping nobody would pick that one. Oh. Depart from me, you who are cursed, for I was hungry, and you did not feed me. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. I was sick, and you did not care for me. I was in prison, and you did not visit me. These cursed ones questioned Jesus, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry, or as a stranger, or sick, or in prison, and did not help you? Jesus replied, Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do unto me. There are a couple of ways to look at that one. You can look at that one as an ethical charge from Jesus, basically saying, help those who are in need. Wherever you see those in need, you are to help. And if you look at Jesus' teachings, there are other examples of this ethical charge that he gave his followers. And that's how sayings like this from Jesus are typically interpreted. But I like to see them from a more spiritual vantage point. What if when Jesus said, I was sick and you did not care for me, I was in prison, you did not visit me, he wasn't being metaphorical in order to make an ethical point. What if he actually meant that? What if Jesus really meant, I was sick and you did not care for me, I was in prison, you did not visit me, even though they never saw him sick or in prison? Well, if you dig deeply into the spiritual message of Jesus, and indeed into the spiritual message of pretty much every contemplative tradition, there is a deeper spiritual teaching that can put a new light on sayings like this. And the deeper spiritual teaching is that we all share the same spiritual nature. We are all children of God. We all possess that same spark of the divine. And when you recognize that we all share this same spark of the divine, you recognize that we are all partaking of the same spiritual ground of being. That spark of the divine, that spiritual energy that animates us all, came from God. And so you've heard the saying probably, it's all one. This is a very profound spiritual teaching. It's rooted in all the world's religions. If you go to India, almost everybody greets you with namaste. Now you know the word, you know the meaning of the word? The light in me recognizes the light in you, and when we recognize that light together, we are one. I bow to the light in you. So we're all one. And if you look at the teachings of Jesus through that lens, you realize whatever we do not do to the least, we do not do unto Jesus. That's a very profound way to look at the teachings of Jesus. It leaves us no excuses for not showing compassion. That's a steep demand. Bill, would you like to pick our fate next? Grab one and hand it to me. Nobody's digging deep here. All right. Another long one. Oh. The only thing you have to offer another human being ever is your own state of being. You can cop out only just so long saying, I've got all this fine coat, Joseph's coat of many colors. I know all this and I can do all this. But everything you do, whether you're cooking food or doing therapy or being a student or being a lover, you are only doing your own being. You're only manifesting how evolved a consciousness you are. That's what you're doing with another human being. That's the only dance there is. Anybody happen to recognize where that one comes from? That's from Ram Dass, who passed away a few years ago. Everybody know Ram Dass by any chance? Yes. Raise your hand if you know Ram Dass. Oh, I need to explain Ram Dass a little bit. All right, raise your hand if you know who Timothy Leary was. All right. Timothy Leary is the one who corrupted Richard Alpert when they were working together in the psychology department in William James Hall at Harvard University. Well, they are the only two professors ever to get kicked out of Harvard University. And after they got kicked out of Harvard University, Timothy Leary became a psychedelic prophet, so to speak, and Richard Alpert went to India on a spiritual search. And there he found his guru. And his guru renamed him Ram Dass. And so Richard Alpert became Ram Dass and took a Hindu path through his life, moved back to America and was, I'd say, a wildly popular teacher, at least among people who appreciated Eastern philosophies. And he passed away a few years ago, and that saying comes from his book, The Only Dance There Is. The only thing you're ever doing with another human being is showing how evolved a consciousness you are. Let that one sink in. In other words, the nature of my interpersonal reactions with other people reveal my level of spiritual evolution. And the nature of your reaction with other people reveals your level of spiritual evolution. It's rather daunting, isn't it? Might make you think twice before you act on that negative impulse, might it not? Some of us are studying the book Living Presence, and this is sort of the follow-up to the Enneagram as part of the skill set I'm bringing as prescriptions for how to build and maintain beloved community. Living Presence is actually a book written by an American Sufi sheikh, Kabir Helminski. And the point of that book is the same as the saying from Ram Dass. Living Presence basically means we take on spiritual work, spiritual study, spiritual practice in order to transform as human beings from our egoic nature to our spiritual nature. Because acting from our egoic nature, you've heard me say this before, we tend to act out of instinct and almost always in our own self-interest. Because our instinctual nature has an agenda. And it's a self-serving agenda. Not always selfish, but self-serving. But throughout the traditions we're taught there's another aspect of our being of which we tend to remain unaware unless we take on the work necessary to discover it, cultivate it, and live from it. And that's our spiritual nature. And when we discover, cultivate, and live from our spiritual nature, we show up in the world in a very different way. We show up with those qualities that are inherent in our spiritual nature. Love, unconditional love, compassion, patience, forgiveness, charity. And so that's what Ram Dass is getting at. When you are in relationship with other human beings, look at the nature of your interpersonal dynamics with them and ask yourselves, am I coming from the best qualities that are within me, or am I coming from my self-interested lower nature in this relationship? And I guarantee you, if you carry that question around for a few days and remember to ask yourself about it when you engage other people, you're going to find out you've got some work to do. But don't feel bad about that. The work never ends. It's ongoing. Who wants to pick our fate next? All right. All right. I feel very self-indulgent. I love doing services like this because one of the things I'm very passionate about is looking at the wisdom from the different world religions and philosophies and being able to make connections between those as I explain them, like Ram Dass, who was a Hindu, and how that connects to Sufism through the work of Kabir Helminski. Not everything needs commentary. I think this one speaks for itself. But let it speak to your heart, not your mind. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God. Indeed, everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. The one who does not love does not know God, for God is love. Kind of a great footnote. The last point, isn't it? Doug, would you mind picking one out for us? Ah, all right. Oh, I like them all because I picked them. It's like, oh, this is good too. But the reason I'm reacting is like, some of them I'm like, I'm not so sure they're going to be great grist, but so far, so good. This one, though, I doubly like because when the Developmental Ministry Search Committee was interviewing me, I shared this with the committee as part of my understanding of what developmental ministry is. Come to the edge, he said. We can't. We're afraid, they responded. Come to the edge, he said. We can't. We'll fall, they responded. Come to the edge, he said. And so they came. He pushed them. And they flew. Yom Apollinaire, if I'm saying that name right. That could be either spiritual or professional. Let's do the professional take on this. Kind of a prelude to the few words I want to say during my minister's report this afternoon, so I won't spend too much time on this. Developmental ministry is different than settled ministry. Settled ministers, hopefully, have a long-term vested interest in their place in the congregation. And so when they think about how to show up in a congregation and what levers to pull, they're doing a very different calculation than a developmental minister. Because most settled ministers want to be in their pulpit long-term. Job security. One must be politic and careful. Developmental ministers are pre-fired. We have a year-by-year contract. It may be renewed for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or 5 years or 6 years or 7 years, according to the UUA. But it's always possible that one of the parties can say, we're not going to renew this. The board may say to me this spring, thank you for your service, we're going to move in another direction, we're not going to offer you another year's contract. Or I might say to the board, it's been lovely working with you, you're all a great group of folks, but I think I've done all I can, I'm not going to sign a contract, I'm going to move on to the next congregation. That actually creates a whole different context in which to do ministry. Because it says to you, you are here to accomplish certain goals. Those goals are goals determined between you and the congregation toward the end of creating a certain type of community or culture that is ready for a settled minister. Which means developmental ministers don't tend to make calculations about their long-term presence in a congregation. Developmental ministers tend to make calculations about how do I get this congregation from point A to point B so they're ready for a settled minister. And sometimes what that means is that you have to pull levers or move in directions or encourage the congregation to do things that are uncomfortable for them. In other words, part of my job is to say to you all, come to the edge. And part of my job is to push you. And hopefully, given my experience in ministry, I know when and where to push you so that you will fly. All right. One of the good things about salad bowl preaching is we'll always end on time. So let's do one more. Because, you know, if you get me going, like next week I'm preaching on Nietzsche, we might be here a while. My doctoral dissertation was like 320 some pages. So, Barbara, would you? Yeah, all right. Oh my gosh, there's 3 of you. And my mother's name was Barbara. The only Barbara I ever knew, and when I came here, I said, oh my gosh, why are there like 5 Barbaras in this congregation? I thought it was a rare name. And one of the Barbaras, Barb Ryder, said, kind of a common Southern name, which I didn't know.
It was also one of the most popular girls' names in the 1930s.
Oh, one of the most popular girls' names. Oh, okay. Well, the Beach Boys did sing a song, Barbara Ann. My mother's middle name was also Ann, and she actually was from Eastern Kentucky. My mother was, did I say this before? I'm getting too old to remember what I said when, in what context to who, and whether it was last week or 5 years ago. My mother actually grew up in the hills of Kentucky. Her daddy was a coal miner, and they grew up one holler over from Loretta Lynn. And actually, my mother's Loretta Lynn's 3rd cousin, which I find fascinating until I found out from my mother, how close were you? Like, are you in the will? Nope. Then it became less fascinating. But if you watch the movie Coal Miner's Daughter, that is how my mother grew up. And she was Barbara Ann, which has nothing to do with whatever I pulled out or Barbara pulled out. The joy of the Spirit ever abides, but not what seems pleasant to the senses. Both these, differing in their purpose, prompt us to action. All is well for those who choose the joy of the Spirit, but those who prefer the pleasant miss the goal of life. Perennial joy or passing pleasure. This is the choice one is always to make. Hatha Upanishad. That could be a long exegesis, so we'll go here with it. A central teaching, not just of mine, but all the contemplatives, so it's not like I came up with this one, is about the fact that the spiritual journey is a negotiation between your egoic demands and your spiritual nature. There are about 5 footnotes to that can be pulled out of this reading from the Upanishad. But the one I'll pull out is this one. I always tell people the spiritual life isn't about eradicating the ego. The ego must have its day in court. Ego must be able to go out and play once in a while. And it is okay for you to have egoic desires for yourself, even though you're on a spiritual journey. Because it's not an either or, it's a both and. We have a spiritual nature and we have an egoic nature. which largely runs on instinct. And some of those instincts must be satisfied to have a satisfactory egoic life. We must be able to assert our ego to secure our safety, food, shelter. And we must assert our ego if we want to have loving relationships with a partner with whom we might replicate the gene pool. Your mind to spiritual matters. We're not going to do that here in the West, but I think it's a great model to emphasize that at some point in our lives, we need to quit serving the ego's agenda only and begin to ask ourselves questions about spirituality. If we serve our egoic agenda only, we're going to find that our service of the egoic agenda never ends. Because whatever the ego desires, it pursues, likely obtains. And the point of this reading is, how long does the satisfaction of the attainment of that desire last for you? Not very long, typically. And then you have to move on to keep the ego happy, chasing the next object of your desire until you attain it. And how long does the satisfaction of the attainment of that desire work for you? Not terribly long, typically. So you can get into this loop where you're serving the ego as a matter of course, and eventually you will find, if you're at least somewhat self-aware, that you're a bit like a hamster on the wheel. And it will become tiring and less fulfilling, less rewarding over time. What this Upanishad is telling you is, if you turn your attention inward to your spiritual nature, and you focus on the cultivation of it, what you will find there is a reward system that is not transitory in nature, that is completely fulfilling. And that reward system is finding within yourself the nature of your own true being, that is, as I mentioned a while ago, unconditionally loving, patient, kind, forgiving, charitable. And those aspects of you are not transient in nature. They're aspects of you that you can cultivate and live from the remainder of your days. Passing pleasure or perennial joy. This is the choice to make. So it's always good, I would say, honor the ego, meet its needs, even have expectations that your egoic life ought to be contented and rewarding for you. But don't serve it alone. There is another opportunity that awaits us within us. All right, we'll end there. And our last hymn this morning is number 20, Be Thou My Vision. And great minds think alike, Jera, because I don't think we coordinated this week. But since I love it so much, if you would stand and sing Be Thou My Vision, I would appreciate it.
Oh
Just a reminder that there won't be a receiving line today because of the congregational meeting. We close our service this morning with two simple words by our own Dr. Riegel. Love better. Love better.